it's such an important thing. Purpose leads to fulfillment. Purpose leads to happiness. Purpose leads to having that motivation to get up. Purpose leads to being able to create the discipline to be able to go and do those things. Yet when I go out into the world and if I step into a room of business owners and I ask them, do you love what you do? Do you have a purpose in your life? Many of them say yes. Many of them are very clear on what they're doing and why they're doing it. And they love what they do. Yet when I step out into the average normal world and I talk to regular people, it's rare that people are really clear. A lot of people are floating through life. And I personally believe one of the reasons that so many people are unhappy or depressed or dealing with mental illness and unhappiness is because they don't have that purpose. They're not clear what they're here for, and they feel like they're just going through the motions. So what do you recommend to people who are trying to get clear on their purpose so they can really get on that path towards creating a great life?
I think number one, it starts with introspection and developing self-awareness, right? People don't want to hear this, but there are trade-offs that you have to make, right? And you have to decide where you're going to make those trade-offs. Everybody wants to be a millionaire. Not everybody wants to do what it takes to be a millionaire. And that's okay, right? If work-life balance, living in a certain place, if those things are your priorities, you need to determine that those are your priorities, and you need to be okay letting other areas fall off, right? And I think understanding where you fall on the values perspective of like what your life looks like, if it's where you live, how much you work, how much money you make, that's the first thing you need to understand, right? And you also need to understand what your strengths are and what your gaps are as a person. I think obviously, if you have a growth mindset, you believe you can become good at anything. And I think that's true, but there are also like behavioral and personality things that you're just never going to change. And I think it's pretty important to understand what those things are for you. So that's like where it all starts is understanding what you want your life to look like, and what tool set do you have to go get that. And then it's about like putting a plan together, right? And executing that plan. And then, once you have that should guide your purpose, right? The one thing I'll say that I think people get confused about is there is a difference between purpose and passion. And it's like the fallacy of young people sometimes, and it's older people's faults, because older people tell people to follow their passion. And I don't believe in that. I don't believe you follow your passion. I believe you work for it. I was a sociology major with a minor in art history and sign language and didn't own a computer. And then I spent 16 years selling very complex IT solutions to the biggest companies in the world. And I was super passionate about it. I did not stand up in front of seventh grade and say, I cannot wait to be an IT salesperson someday.
Yeah.
I know guys and girls that work in insurance sales, that work in, whatever industry, melting iron ore. I don't care. They're not passionate about it. Or they didn't get into it because they were passionate about it. They had a purpose that they wanted to achieve. They realized that this was a vertical that they could achieve it in. And that's how they developed the passion for it, right? So that's a big, really important delineation between purpose and passion that I don't think is really understood for folks that are early in their career and their lives.
Yeah, it really is misunderstood, because there is something about being passionate about your work. Yet oftentimes when you get really good at something and you find the right audience, the right customer base, the right product, when you're really good at something and then you find something that you do actually care about, you get passionate about it because you start seeing what the results can be. I know for me, when it comes to, running a real estate firm, running funds, helping people be able to make those investments, I'm not passionate about funds. I'm not passionate about running numbers and doing all this analytical stuff. But I'm super passionate about what it can do for people. I'm super passionate about what happens when somebody starts to take ownership and control of their life, when they get clear on what their purpose and vision is, when they understand and name their number about what they actually need to live, and go through the process of creating a plan. Like, that's exciting, but you only really get to that point of finding that passion by being on the journey and taking those steps. And so oftentimes people are staying still, staying put in what they're doing because they're looking for that passion instead of getting really, really good at something and then letting those pieces come together.
It's so true. And you hit the nail on the head. You get passionate about the stuff you're good at. You get good at stuff by practicing, right? Like, it's not one and then the other. It's first it's practice, then the passion comes with achievement and mastering, right? That's an awesome way to put it.
When it comes to the folks that you're working with, I know one of the reasons you've chosen to work with athletes, to work with veterans, is because you have a personal connection. But I know another reason is because when you want to build an A team, when you want to bring the best people together, character and already having that determination, that grit, that discipline is so key because you can layer on those skills on top of it. What should somebody who's listening, who wants to step in and become the best at what they do and really build those skills and put in that effort and that work, what should they do? Where should they start? And what should be the thing that they think about every single day as they're on that path?
So the term that I use a lot is I call it, being dialed in, right? And it's if you played sports or you served in the military, I don't have to explain what that means to you. Some people you do, right? And that's like kind of step one is like, what does it mean to be dialed in? It means that you have a purpose, you have a plan, and you're doing whatever it takes to achieve that plan. So I think for somebody that wants to be excellent at anything, you have to figure out what being dialed in looks like for you as an individual, right? How does that mean that you spend your day? What time do you wake up? When do you go to bed? And what are you doing between those two activities? And I think if you can't, and you said some of the reasons we focus on athletes and veterans, but that's the number one reason is I don't need to explain to them what being dialed in means. And to be excellent at anything, you've got to be dialed in. My father, I mentioned, was a hockey coach. He used to say to us when we were little, like I'm talking 7, 8 years old. He used to say, there's a lot of people that play hockey. There's not a lot of hockey players. And there's a difference there, right? The hockey players live, breathe, sleep hockey. And that's when they make a decision, whatever that decision is, that context of that identity is how they make that decision. I'm not going to this party on Friday night. I'm not getting in this car. I'm not going to that this weekend, right? So I think it comes down to like figuring out, starting where we talked about earlier, and then figuring out what it takes to be there and being dialed into it every single day. That's how you can become excellent. I don't care what you want to do, but you should want to really be excellent at whatever it is you decide.
Yeah, a healthy obsession really does go far. And athletes have developed that. That's the reason they were successful in the first place.
Totally.
So, when I'm like you, I love really going deep into things. I love getting obsessed. I love grinding. I want to create something that's really impactful. And then during the pandemic, I sold my house. I went out, was living in Hawaii because, I found a back door and it was unbelievably affordable because nobody else was on the island. But I met this gentleman and he was retired. He was a builder and he owned the Airbnb that we were living in. And he asked me this question because he saw how hard I was grinding. He said, well, what's your number? What's that point that it's going to be enough? And it really hit me. It really hit me from this point of, I'm in a business where the purpose of the business is to make money, right? We buy real estate, we grow the value, we create a return for investors. So at the core of it, there's kind of an unlimited potential that can grow within this business. But when he asked me that, it really hit me because although I have set those numbers, I've ignored every time I've hit it and I haven't really celebrated. I've just gone after the next thing. Thanks for listening to the Investor Mindset Podcast. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. And if you'd like to watch another, here's one up top. And here's another great video right down below.